preview today, and I know this one should be a good one. This is the Chicago Bulls day today. And Chicago, man, we're waiting on you, Chicago. We are waiting on you. You know what I mean? This city has been sitting, waiting on this team to be them dudes again for the last now 25 years. It's been 25 years since Michael Jordan and crew lifted up that trophy in Utah and won their sixth championship in what was it, 8 years. So now they haven't even sniffed that type of moment, and since then they haven't even sniffed the final. I think they got to a conference final maybe once in that time, but the Bulls have done their absolute best to try to put together teams that will be marketable, and also elite, but it just hasn't worked. You got Zach LaVine, a guy that I think they possibly overspent 4 years ago when they got him from Minnesota. Also, you got very good players in Kobe White, who winds up being a bench guy because you bring in another point guard. I just feel like the Bulls have really messed up in the draft over the years. They haven't drafted the significant player that's going to put them over the top. They haven't drafted anybody that's going to be the face of their franchise. That's what the biggest problem is with the Bulls. They haven't been able to do that since Michael Jordan. Let's keep it real. They haven't been able to find a guy that's going to be able to really lead that team since Michael Jordan. Yes, I know they had Derrick Rose, and Derrick Rose was really, really great. He was really, really good. But you got to understand, Derrick Rose had a good room of veterans with him as well too, and he always had it to where people question, was he the best player on the team, because he had Jimmy Butler running with him as well too, young Jimmy Butler, and a lot of people were very uh, high on Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler is the one that's still here, while Derrick Rose has bounced around the NBA because of his injury issues, and that's something that he has no control of, and Derrick Rose is always going to be seen as a big what if. But for the 5 years we had him killing it the way he did, we're always going to be very, very fortunate that we had Derrick Rose as one of the better players in the NBA for that period in time, because he had a significant stretch that nobody will ever really forget. But that still didn't lead the Bulls to any championships. And in Chicago, championships matter. Winning a lot of games, that's great. But winning championships, that's where they remember you forever. Because in Chicago, winning championships is kind of rare in a sense, unless you're the Blackhawks. And the Blackhawks, they get a lot of love because they put together winning situations. The Bears get a lot of love because they're pretty much the oldest sports team in Chicago, but they are the biggest misery in Chicago. And then you have the Cubs and the White Sox. The Cubs will always be beloved. They're a tourist team, North Side. There's a lot of things that you can do. They're the essence of what Chicago is. And then you look at South Side, where the White Sox are. That's everything Chicago tries to avoid. And so they're both set up pretty perfectly. But then you got the Bulls. The Bulls are a team that pretty much has themselves in a situation where they can do whatever they want, but they got to step it up. That's the whole thing. And pretty much with that, at the end of the day, it's just something that's very, you know, something that gets you a little impatient, because they have a team that should be able to compete at the highest level. Everybody's in place for that team, and pretty much they need to step it up. Zach LaVine needs to be much better this year. He has to be healthier. DeMar DeRozan is a guy that I really feel like if they're not winning games immediately this year, or they know that they're not going to be a great team when it comes to the playoffs, let them go and let them get some, because right now DeMar DeRozan can yield you some pretty good picks. If there's a team that's chasing a ring or something of that nature, they'll give up those first round picks for DeMar DeRozan in January. Okay. I'm just saying, if the Bulls aren't going to step up and be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, don't hold up DeMar DeRozan's career. That's all I'm saying at the end of the day. And pretty much the Bulls are in position to be one of the better teams in the NBA this year if they can go ahead and just play as a total unit. And I think with the addition of a guy like Pat Beverly, and you still got Caruso there as well too. They're one of the rare teams in the NBA that can say that they still have the same core that they've had the last 2 or 3 years, and that's something that's very important moving forward. And I noticed this when I've been watching a lot of '80s and '90s games. Reason why we loved some of these teams and loved some of these players that don't really get mentioned much today because they're never going to be in the Hall of Fame. It's because they played for those teams for decades. They didn't play for those teams for a hot 1 or 2 years or a quick 3 months. They played for these teams for 5, 6, 7 years before they were traded and before they were released and all this other stuff that happens. The Bulls are really trying to build a core unit, and that's something that I recognize, and I say they can be one of the better teams in the NBA if they can stay healthy this year and if they can stay focused. That's the biggest thing with this team. They got a good coach in Billy Donovan. They got a good fan base. They got a great fan base. Let me take that back. Great fan base in Chicago. And so if this team just wins a little bit, they can get the city behind them on that, because the city is begging for a winner right now. And the Bulls are really the team that has next up to be the leaders of the city in Chicago at this moment, because they have a fun bunch. They have guys that love the game of basketball. They don't have Michael Jordan walking through that door, but they can be a team that is fun to watch and finds themselves in position to be a team that can chase something real in the Eastern Conference playoffs. I've said this before. The Eastern Conference has. I'm gonna add in Miami because I feel like I've been disrespecting Miami. And I'm sorry for that. But you add in. I'm gonna add in Miami and say Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Those four teams are set in what they're doing. 5 through 8, you don't know who the hell that's going to be. The Cavs think they got a seat at the table. Who else thinks they have a seat at the table? Brooklyn thinks they have a seat at the table because those teams have been consistent the last few years. But the Bulls, if they put it all together, they can be better than the Cavs, and they can be better than the Nets. And that's something that we can all pretty much agree upon, that if they can stay healthy, the Bulls should be right in the mix for that 5th seed. They should be right in the mix for that, or the 4th seed, because you never know how Miami's going to get. Miami just has to get in the playoffs. But the top three, I think that's who the top three is actually going to be. I don't know who the number one is going to be out the group, but that's who the top three is going to be, in my opinion. So with that, that's going to be a wrap on the Bulls. The Bulls. And hopefully the Bulls can go